So she was texting ChatGPT asking, who is my spirit guide and what are they trying to say to me? And was really using ChatGPT, placing that in the role of spiritual guidance.
If we're deriving our spiritual guidance from a tool that is very specifically designed to only give us what it thinks we want to hear, then we are not receiving guidance. We're receiving platitudes. We're receiving manipulation.
Someone telling me about myself is not actually me learning about myself and learning about how supporting myself in shifting things inside of me. Only I can know myself.
Welcome, friends, to the Reiki Women Podcast, an exploration into the profound depths of the system of Reiki from a Japanese spiritual perspective and how that relates to our modern lives.
We are keeping it real to Reiki's origins, challenging the New Age stereotype that things like crystals, chakras, and angels are authentic aspects of the system. I'm Bronwen Logan, and when I'm not writing best-selling books about the Japanese system of Reiki, 75,000 readers and counting, I'm here debunking outmoded Reiki myths and coaching individuals and groups through my website, Reiki with Bronwen.
And I'm Michaela Daystar, lead teacher and weaver of Heartscapes Reiki, connecting the dots between Reiki and environmental and social justice, because our individual healing cannot be extracted from healing relationship with the collective and with the land.
And I'm Carrie Varela from the Reiki Healing Society, here to help you transform your Reiki practice into a thriving, prosperous business. Because while passion fuels your purpose, it's time to make it sustainable, authentic, and beautifully you. We're three women diving into the heart of Japanese Reiki. We're building a community that centers women's voices and inspires well-being. We're not just for women, we're for everybody. Come join the conversation.
Hi, and welcome to Reiki Women Podcast. Now, today we're going to be talking about something which is affecting all of us at the moment. And it's something that's growing in our world. And I don't know if you're using it or not, or what you're using it for, if you're using it. But I'm talking about AI. Now, AI stands for artificial intelligence, in case you missed that somewhere along the way. A Facebook group called the Reiki Business Collective. There was a question that was posed on it that came up that all three of us went, oh, that's a really interesting question. Christian, who runs that particular Facebook group, has always been very supportive of us. And as a podcast, I hope he doesn't mind us chatting about what's come up in his group. And Carrie is actually going to talk about it. So I'm just going to throw it straight over to you, Carrie, and you can tell us what the question was and your thoughts about it. I'd love to hear.
Yeah, thank you, Bronwen. And thanks again, Christian, for being such a big supporter of our podcast. And using this discussion that was active in his group for our podcast today. So somebody posed this question about having a Reiki student in her classes who was actively engaging with ChatGPT in order to receive spiritual guidance. So she was texting ChatGPT asking, who is my spirit guide and what are they trying to say to me? And was really using ChatGPT, placing that in the role of spiritual guidance. And it's an interesting conversation for us here on the podcast because we have a kind of a unique perspective within Reiki of traditional Reiki, right? And in traditional Reiki, we don't work with angels and guides. There's really this understanding that when we're touching into spiritual energy, is we're touching into our true self. And that this notion of receiving spiritual guidance it has some problematic elements, at least things that I've explored in my life. Now, in the Japanese culture, there is this incredibly beautiful pantheon of Japanese Buddhas. And I would say that I think it's important not to put blinders on that spiritual guidance or working with spirit and maybe a specific spiritual entity is definitely within the realm of Reiki, I think, as my own personal opinion. Right. That's where we're touching into something that is definitely dwelling in a spiritual realm and can manifest itself in really unique ways. And one of the things that kind of came up in a lot of the replies to this particular person on the post was not being judgmental. Don't be judgmental as to how we touch into spiritual guidance. And I do think that it is very unique to each of us individually. But one of the things that the author of this post mentioned was that he just felt that it was a total spiritual bypass, and that by connecting to artificial intelligence and using that as a source of spiritual guidance, that we're actually bypassing this deep and authentic connection to like a higher power, a greater good, a higher truth, a universal truth, right? And that those are all themes that we touch into within Reiki. And I think it also points to some of the maybe problematic elements, first of all, of connecting to spirits or angels or guides in order to make one decisions in one's life. And they're all topics that we've kind of elaborated on in different ways in this podcast, but I'm really interested in talking about it very specifically today. I think in the Japanese culture, it's very common to go to a temple and have a specific Buddha venerated to that temple, and common to sit in front of the temple, pray, maybe ask guidance or insight. But one of the things that I think is so important in that is that from the Buddhist perspective and the Japanese worldview, is that icon is not a reflection of an actual entity or spiritual being. It's really a reflection of our true self. It's a reflection of our own enlightened nature. And so even as we're praying and speaking or working with a spiritual entity like that, we're actually deep in conversation with our own true self, our own divine self. And I think without that understanding and awareness, there's this sincere danger to kind of bypass one's own sense of responsibility and the choices that you make. So if you are kind of a clairvoyant person and you're constantly getting messages, oh, I should do this, oh, I should do that, you kind of stop being a real person. You just kind of be this puppet being pulled around from place to place. You lose sight of your own intelligence and your own body awareness, your own sense of either morality of what you should do in a situation or what you particularly want out of a situation. And I know that that might be triggering to some, because I honestly fully believe that there is spiritual guidance available to us. And I have had profound experiences where I felt touched by either a spiritual entity or guide or just some unnamed wisdom that's come to me. And I can't really explain what that is, because it dwells in this realm that is mysterious and unknown. And I'm grateful for that. And I think it is this place where I let that deeper wisdom and truth guide my life. Absolutely. But there's also a sense that we can be guided by the wisdom in our bodies and the wisdom in our breath and the wisdom in our hearts as to what we truly want. So I think there's kind of several steps here. First of all, there's this step into, is working with spiritual guides and spiritual entities a part of the system of Reiki? Why or why not? And then there's this whole other aspect of that is, and is there any problematic aspects of that? And then this other aspect of, is artificial intelligence an appropriate thing to be receiving guidance from? Now, I got to admit, I do lean into artificial intelligence or ChatGPT in terms of helping me write. Often, I will take a complex sentence, throw it through ChatGPT, and it spins it out and makes it sound a little bit smoother and cleaner, or I'll use it to kind of simplify a post, or it's actually an incredibly handy tool. But there's a sense of personal responsibility when I do anything, post anything that's under my name or my accounts, that I have to take ownership of what I say and what I do. I think it's really problematic to think, God, could artificial intelligence guide my life. Artificial intelligence is very helpful for gathering knowledge, gathering insight, gathering different things to know about, but that's just facts. Wisdom is knowledge applied. It is knowledge that has an element of compassion and an element of humanity to it, which of course artificial intelligence, it might try to simulate that, but it lacks that. So I'll pause there and pass it on to you. Michaela, would you like to take the baton from here?
Oh my God, there's so much in this one. Wow. Okay. I feel like I need to first kind of disclaimers. Okay. My personal stance is that there are enough unethical and dangerous layers to AI generally. And by unethical, I'm thinking of the environmental impact of the supercomputers that make it possible and the ways in which I am seeing it manipulated in ways that are psychologically damaging for people. There are enough of those concerns for me to personally hold a stance that we should be pumping the brakes on this technology. We're in the wild, wild west phase of AI, where this technology is now widely available, is already in use. And the question of do you use it? Well, if you do anything on the computer, yes, you do, because it's now embedded into so many different places without our knowledge or consent. But setting that aside, we as individuals can use any number of programs designed by companies give us access to this tool, and it's fascinating, right? It's incredibly compelling, the things that it can do. And I have friends who really are quite excited to be pushing the boundaries of it. ChatGPT, which is a very basic consumer variety form of AI, how can I push the boundaries of this to do really incredible things? It's a very compelling question. And I have seen those same friends get, in my estimation, addicted and very much hijacked by the alluring magic of this tool in ways that really did function like an addiction in terms of the way that it negatively impacted their life. So my disclaimer, all of that is to say, my disclaimer is I personally hold a stance that I do not actively use AI intentionally for any reason, and I do not think people should be using it as widely as it. I feel a lot more caution needs to be taken around this, and I really feel the wild, wild west kind of feeling of it, where it's let's just do whatever, let's see what this thing can do, and caution to the wind. So that's my personal stance, and I just wanted to make that clear because that does color how I answered this question. I think you're right, Carrie, to differentiate, to start with that question of is the use of spirit guides and seeking a spirit guide and working with a spirit guide something that is embedded into Reiki or not? Clearly, I think you've done a great job articulating the way in which the original form of Reiki holds that differently than the Western form, that the deities inside of Japanese Buddhism and indigenous Shinto practice, as you say, within Buddhist practice, there's this strong element of these deities reflecting an aspect of ourself more so than being something external to us, although there is an element of that. And on the Shinto side, what we're looking at is spirit embedded in nature and an invitation to deeply interrogate our relationship to nature and our function as being part of nature. So those are kind of specific ways of working with what you might call a spirit guide then in the Western sense. So knowing that there's that divide, I am going to focus on the context in which the question was asked, and also kind of generalize it to should ChatGPT or other things like that be used for spiritual guidance of any kind, regardless of whatever system you're inside of. Interestingly, it's much less applicable in the way that we work with Reiki than it is in other forms. So, okay, so all of that being said, the question was posed by a teacher who was bothered by her students' use of ChatGPT. I think she said it seemed lazy, it seemed like spiritual bypassing, as you said, and she wanted to know, what should I do about that as a teacher? And I think she got good advice that There's only so much you can do. You can share your perspective, you can share why you think that it shouldn't be used, and then people really got to make their own path. And I agree with that generally. So speaking more to, if I was to speak to this to my students, or if I was to consider it for myself, or if somebody asked me, hey, what do you think of using ChatGPT to find spiritual guidance? Where my mind goes is how many layers are we willing to put between the guidance that we're receiving and the source of that guidance, which we might conceive of differently. And there is an argument that I've heard in the context of this question, but also just in the terms of social media algorithms. Someone will say, this same topic keeps showing up in my social media feed. I think it's a sign from spirit that I should do that thing. Well, let's think about what we know about social media algorithms and about AI commercial products. They are literally designed and programmed to please you. Fundamentally, social media algorithms and ChatGPT and such are designed to ferret out what you want to know, what you are interested in, what would delight you, what would cause you to take an action, probably a buy that thing action, but any kind of engagement action. They're incredibly savvy at finding that and then giving you that over and over and over again. With ChatGPT, we have the element different than a social media algorithm where it will literally lie to you. It will invent information that it believes will please you because its fundamental goal is to get you to continue engaging because that makes money for the company. And so if we take that just technological fact, that is not in question, right? A social media algorithm is designed to give you what you are most interested in so that you're most likely to engage and probably spend money. And so is ChatGPT. So if we look at that fundamental fact, that's not in question. And then we say, I asked for spiritual guidance of this tool, or I noticed a certain pattern on my social media feed, and it seems like it's a synchronicity that's telling me something from spirit. Those two things are fundamentally opposed to each other because something that's coming through spirit or that's coming through our own deep knowing, our intuition, our relationship to the world around us is not going to just give us what we want to know. It's not going to give us what we most want to hear. It's not going to just show us the things that are going to be most inspiring for us to spend money, right? Our intuition and our connection to spirit, however we define that, whether it's guides or it's our own true self or it's God or it's anything else that is like of the universe, is going to show us what is in the next right move that is in the greatest interest of our development. That's not always going to be what we want to hear. In fact, oftentimes it's going to not be what we want to hear, right? And so if we're deriving our spiritual guidance from a tool that is very specifically designed to only give us what it thinks we want to hear, then we are not receiving guidance. We're receiving platitudes. We're receiving manipulation. Now, I've also heard as a counter to that, but spirit, especially if we're talking about a conscious spirit, or even the ebbs and flows of the energies of the universe, can use a tool like that to deliver authentic information, even if the tool is designed in that way. Maybe. That is something that we each would need to have our own opinion about. I tend to not to be of that belief, but I can understand the reasoning there. Where I would then go at that point is how many layers, again, do we want to put between ourselves and authentic information? Yes, artificial intelligence is designed by people, which means that there is a signature of humanity inside of that technology, but it's also got signatures of things that are very much not humanity. And it's also got signatures of a very specific outlook, a very specific mindset of humanity. So why rely on that when there's so many other ways to have direct relationship with the source of intuitive knowing or spiritual guidance? Why would we want to filter that through these mechanisms that are designed to work against us or to manipulate us? I have a friend who talks about the fact, and there's some points that I agree to this, but that there isn't anything in the world that humans have made that didn't come from the earth, right? Like the materials that we have to make anything comes from the earth. And so a plastic something has the signature of the petroleum and then the ancient life that became the petroleum that then is made into the plastic. And so that plastic can still be regarded as being of the earth, right? All the way up to like nuclear energy and like things that are very destructive. There is a certain way in which that's literally true. But if I have a choice between working with a sacred object that's made from something that's directly from the earth, like wood or stone or fire or clay, versus something that's plastic, I am going to choose the thing that's more direct. There's fewer layers between me and the earth, if that is my intention to be working with the earth. And that feels like a useful analogy with AI. So I'm going to stop there because I have all kinds of other thoughts, but I think
too much.
That was already too much. So I'm going to stop.
I don't know where to start. Oh, just on that last note that you're talking about, just because something comes from the earth doesn't mean it's good for us. Another example, you use plastic. How about ultra processed foods? Right? Ultra processed foods. It's food. It comes originally from food, but we've done so much shit to it that it's actually bad for us. Just because something comes from the earth, yes, everything comes from the earth, but not everything is good for us. We need to be able to use our brains and think about what we're doing and how we do it. Yeah. Anyways. So what does that have to do with AI? Well, I think it's interesting to know how AI works. And I think you both spoke a bit to that. There is one of the AI things, I think it's perplexity. When you ask a question, it shows you the thought process that it goes through to get to the answer. Now, what it's actually doing, and I think this is what people need to understand, it's just going to different sources. So it's going to my website, Carrie's website, Michaela's website, possibly, but it's also going to Hippity Pip's website and Googie Googoo's website, and it's just picking up information from everywhere, and then it goes glunk, 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 glunk. This is a thought, right? But it's not really a thought. It's just taking information that is already out there and putting it into a form that gives an answer. That is not what I would consider a spirit guide would be or do if you believed in spirit guides, right? I mean, it's just putting the words back out there that have already been put out there by someone else. And who the hell is that? That might be someone that you may not agree with their views or ideas, and the AI doesn't know that you don't agree with that. So yes, personal responsibility. You need to understand how it works before you start doing stuff like asking it for spiritual guidance. The idea of spiritual guidance is beautiful if we think of it in terms of having a teacher. When I sit here in this podcast, I think of you two guys as my teachers. And we sit here together and we work through things and we talk through our ideas about stuff. And I agree with some, disagree with some. And it's someone there to be a sounding board against. And that's what I think a spiritual teacher is. And we can find them in different places in our lives. But I don't think that we know enough about AI because AI, as I said, the information it's giving us is just regurgitating. That was the word I was looking for, regurgitating someone else's stuff And what is that? I don't know. So definitely, please don't go out there looking for spiritual guidance from an AI. And I think if people have a better understanding of what it is and how it works, then maybe they can work with it in a more responsible way. I would hope. And I understand your concerns, Michaela. You were saying about the usage of, what is that, the bandwidth of it all taking over our lives in so many ways, mentally, but also just all the big farms of power and all of that. Yes, I agree. But the internet also does that. And here we are sitting on the internet doing this stuff. So it's such a complicated, difficult place to be. And I know when I think about them talking about putting restrictions on AI, here in Australia, I mean, how long have we had the internet now? 25, 30 years. They still haven't even caught up with putting regulations on the plain old internet, let alone AI. I find that our bureaucratic systems are not fast enough in keeping up with this. I don't know how that's all going to go and how that will work. I think one of the things that also could help is clarity in why you're actually practicing the system of Reiki. Get rid of all the other stuff. Go back to, why am I doing this? Am I doing this so I can speak to something out there that I don't even know what it is or what it's going to tell me? Is that why I'm practicing the system? I don't think so. Yeah, that might be fun, but maybe it turns from fun into something that's not fun. So we need to be careful with that. But are you practicing the system of Reiki for fun, or are you doing it for something to actually become more of a compassionate, loving, caring person? Are you practicing it because ultimately, at the very end reaches of our practice, maybe there are glimpses of enlightenment? If we think of why Mikao Usui created the system, yes, as a healing system, but why do we want to heal? We want to heal to become whole. What does that mean? It means ultimately enlightenment. So if we are practicing for that, that is about us. It's about our own divinity, if you like, our own finding that within ourselves. Carrie began with that, finding your true self. What is that? And it doesn't seem to align with this idea of looking outside of ourselves for someone else to tell us what to do. I don't see that as a path, a spiritual path, especially not in the system of Reiki, and especially not with AI. I think that's very disempowering, going outside of ourselves. I wrote an article just a couple of months ago called I am an angel. Yes, I am an angel. And basically saying that I am the angel. I am the one that has within me compassion and wisdom, and it's all there. But how do I find it? And I find it through working on myself. I don't find it by someone else telling me, oh, Bronwen, I don't know. What do spirit guides say? What do they say? I actually don't know what they might say. Someone telling me about myself is not actually me learning about myself and learning about how supporting myself in shifting things inside of me. Only I can know myself. So that's a very personal journey, and relying on others can be dangerous, and also imagining that it's outside of ourselves. Maybe that takes away our self-autonomy. Maybe it's like, oh, well, they told me to do it. So, you know, it's actually not taking responsibility for your own self-healing. For me, I don't feel like I'm separate from that universe in that sense. So I don't think the universe ever tells me anything. I think that it's me finding out for myself in my experience of being a part of this universe. Once again, going outside of ourselves, looking for someone to tell us about ourselves or direct us. we need to find that strength inside of ourselves. And that is the challenge. What do you think, Carrie?
Oh, goodness. Well, so many good points. In our own way, we're kind of our own algorithm. But I'm very grateful for our algorithm because we're three people who we often agree with each other. I mean, we obviously there's points of maybe disagreement here and there, but we kind of come from a different point of view, or from this point of view, right? I just want to be mindful that there's space to have different feelings and different points of view about spiritual guidance. I think my post, what I responded to in this post was saying that it's a moral issue. It's an ethical issue. It's not a judgmental issue. It's not to judge the student who is seeking that, but is to, as their teacher, as somebody who is in the business and practice of authentic spiritual connection, we should be warning that person that that is not okay. Like, that is dangerous. And I think there's some documented cases where teenagers were sharing their suicidal thoughts with ChatGPT or some other AI stuff, and ChatGPT goaded them down the road. You were saying, Michaela, telling people what they want to hear, even giving suggestions on how they could kill themselves. And there's a poor family dealing with that. Their son is not here because of ChatGPT and because that's how he was inappropriately using it. It's tragic. That is just, it's just, we can have different feelings about AI and different senses of whether or not it's morally right or wrong for us. But this is the point of seeking guidance outside of oneself. It can be morally dangerous because we're not taking personal responsibility for our actions. And when that happens, and we lose sense of what is right or wrong for us, it can just lead us down really painful roads. And why do I know that? Because I've walked those roads, and my own spiritual journey opened me up spiritually, clairvoyantly, and there are choices that I made that I have to live with, but they weren't right. And I kind of tried to punch it off on some intuitive insight, but it's really how our mind works as well. It's to know our mind and to know how our mind is also kind of muddying the spiritual connection and the different things that we think about. Not every thought that goes through our mind is true. And in fact, there's really painful thoughts that we might be confronting or feeling or experiencing that aren't true too. And we have to kind of take ourselves away from it. And that's anxiety, is when I'm just maybe confronted by this overwhelming financial fear, and I'm just, my whole life is upending and I'm just totally destitute. But if you can question that belief, you recognize that it's not true. So I think then there begs a question, well, what is that authentic spiritual connection? And I've been teaching Shimpadin Reiki level 3 recently, and in that material we talk about the difference between a relative truth and a universal truth. And this is maybe something that distinguishes us as humans from artificial intelligence, is that we should be able, when we feel the truth, we know the truth. And we have to align ourselves around that truth. Michaela, you talked about artificial intelligence, the algorithm, all of that telling us what we want to hear. And I think that that's also a big hang up for those of us in the world of spiritual and have a heart of compassion and care for people, is that sometimes we want to tell people what they want to hear. That's just a huge part of people pleasing. And we might not even realize we're in that trap, right? We might be telling ourselves what we want to hear. But that's what spiritual integrity and spiritual transmission should align us to, is this universal, like, this is capital T truth, and using that to align our lives, because we're part of this bigger whole. And you said, Bronwen, is just to be a part of the universe, to be a part of that creative moving capacity. And I think when we're talking about connecting into a higher realm of consciousness, what I think of it is an office place. Right? Where it's just like, you got Joe over there, you got Michaela over here. We've got all of these different people, personalities, lives, circumstances. And it's this divine consciousness that kind of gets all of that complexity. And by tapping into that, sourcing into that, it helps us understand ourself in the midst of all of these other dynamic moving parts. And so that's, to me, what spiritual guidance allows me to do. But I always have to come back to taking personal responsibility for my choices. I also have to be grounded in my body and not constantly intuitively, psychically, mentally detached from my body. That is disassociation. There's a difference, and we have to learn how to work with that. If we have these kinds of skills and capacities, first of all, if you offer spiritual mediumship as part of your Reiki practice or just as in your wheelhouse, we have to be mindful not to just tell people what they want to hear. We have to have a sense of integrity around that. This is an example that I do sometimes. It's like, if you're trying to tune in to pick your avocados, you've gone too far. It's too much. It's too much. That is way too much. Take 10 steps back and just feel the avocado. And you'll know whether or not it's a good one for you. I think those are some of the things that I'm very mindful of. I don't use spiritual guidance to help me pick my avocados or to tell me the right route to my grocery store. I use it when I deeply want to hear the universe share with me wisdom, truth that is aligned with my greatest good. And I don't think of that as separate from me or as something that is coming from an external source, but it's so much of it is sourced from my own body and mind intelligence, but that is connected to this greater whole. AI is not connected to that greater whole. It is a cheap misrepresentation of that. And
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, on Google, if you Google something and you get the AI result, it's really interesting to see where they're citing and where they're getting that information. Sometimes that stuff is total crap.
Yeah.
Just total crap. Anyways.
Yeah.
So I think if in a case where, back to the thing, if my Reiki student was in my class, I would be incredibly concerned if she was trying to get spiritual guidance from AI. And it's because I care about her. And I don't want her to go down that path because I don't think it's going to lead her to the spiritually aligned, beautiful life that Reiki can actually help you actualize.
Oof. Carrie, you said earlier something to the effect of kind of we are our own algorithm, or we have our own algorithm inside of ourselves. And that kind of sent me down an inquiry that's connected here, maybe a little bit tangentially. But when I thought about, well, what is that algorithm for us naturally and biologically? Well, one way that we could think about that is through the mechanism of synchronicity and the way that our intuition will be in relationship to synchronicities we're observing out in the world. And coincidences are happening all the time and always. Things that have relationship or similarities kind of happening in the same time or space in a way that, if you paid attention, could strike you as having some form of meaning. It's our conscious engagement, our noticing of that coincidence, our meaning making of it that brings it into this kind of more energetic or spiritual category of synchronicity. I had a fascinating conversation with my dad on my YouTube channel about synchronicity, about which he is an expert. Go check it out. But the other piece that I wanted to bring with that is when you talked, Carrie, about the process of questioning and being aware that whatever guidance we feel we're receiving, whether it's from some spirit or some external source or from within, or because we have noticed a synchronicity that we're making meaning of, it's important to take that pause and interrogate the meaning that we're making of that thing. Because as you said, we're going to have to live with the consequences of whatever choice that we make or whatever action we take as a result of that guidance. And we are predisposed, just like ChatGPT, we are mentally predisposed to seek what we like, to seek what validates our own opinion that we already have, to seek what makes us feel good, that makes us feel like we're on the right track. And we have our own internal biases that are going to impact how we interpret any kind of guidance we're getting, whether it's from ChatGPT or some animal spirit or our own intuition or a billboard that we keep seeing at interesting times, right? And I think I just wanted to bring that piece, as that's where I'm landing, is that wherever it is that we're receiving some form of message or feeling in our body when we experience a synchronicity, there's that tingly feeling we get when we're, oh, that was weird, the way those things lined up together like that. To take a pause before we jump to making meaning from that and to say, well, this is what it means. This means I should do this, or this is validating this. To think, am I noticing that synchronicity because it's what I want to see? And am I missing other synchronicities or other messages because it's not what I want to see, right? And to always be in that space of compassionately being in curiosity about our own thoughts and our own impulses, because we are biologically wired to seek what we like and to seek what is going to validate what we already believe.
100%.
And that's true whether it's a human brain or ChatGPT, right? And ChatGPT, the makers of that are exploiting that fact, right? That's companies taking advantage of the fact that they know that our brains are going to follow what we like. And they're going to say, great, I will give you a breadcrumb pathway of what you like to follow you right to where you're going to spend money with me. So we know that that's true. But even just on the biological, organic level, we also have that. And so it's always it should be part of our spiritual practices to have that still space where we can be in curiosity, we can question ourselves, we can have non-judgmental, compassionate dialogues with ourselves of what is the meaning that I meant to make of this, and is there something that I'm missing because of my biases? So I think I wanted to just land us there.
Yeah. And you were talking about suicide and AI before. I think it's a good thing for people to be aware of, because I saw the stats and it says that more than 1 million people every week talk to ChatGPT about suicide. So that's something to think about. And is that a good place to be going to for that? I don't think necessarily. And it's this thing that we think that it's a private place where we can discuss something. I guess something that we wouldn't normally discuss with someone else. Or there's this privateness about it. There's nothing private about it. ChatGPT know that there's 1 million people every week asking about suicide, and they know that because they see they've got
the data.
Come on, guys, wake up. It's not a private little place. Look, I use it. I didn't actually talk about that before, but yeah, I use it, but I try to use it sensibly. I enjoy technology, and I think that there's lots of great aspects to it. And then there's lots of other aspects to it that we really need to be aware of. So, yes, be thoughtful of how you use all technology, because, hey, we don't probably understand enough about it at this point and how things work. And keep in mind why you're practicing, what the purpose of your practice is, and try to get back to basics. Don't let anyone disempower you. Yeah, look for being true to who you are, not being true to who someone else is or what someone else is. Just come back to yourself and reach out to your teacher or a Reiki friend if you need some support. Yeah. Wow, that was a really good conversation today, because AI is not an easy thing to talk about, especially when we're not AI specialists, but we are human beings in the world of this. So thanks for sharing that today. If you'd like to share your thoughts about your experiences with AI and how that's worked for you or hasn't worked for you, we'd love to hear. And we hope we can be here to support you as well. Thanks, everyone. And like the thing and subscribe to the thing. And we'll see you next time. Lots of love.